All right, so if you're tuning in for this deep dive, chances are you're dealing with a pretty tough situation.
Yeah.
A no-fault eviction here in California.
Uh-huh.
And I know that term can be super misleading.
It is.
It's like, wait, I haven't done anything wrong. How can I be evicted?
Right.
We've got a whole bunch of sources here to kind of break this all down. But the bottom line is, even if you're a perfect tenant, your landlord might still have the power to end your lease.
Yeah, that's the thing about California law. It's a balancing act.
Yeah.
You know, they're trying to balance the rights of landlords and tenants, and it gets really complicated.
Yeah. So
so
let's start with the basics.
Sure.
What exactly is a no-fault eviction in California?
Okay, so a no-fault eviction basically means that a landlord can end your tenancy for reasons that have nothing to do with you as a tenant.
Okay.
You haven't broken any rules.
Yeah.
You've paid your rent on time.
Right.
But they can still decide to terminate your lease.
So it's not really about fault at all.
Right.
It's about the landlord's reasons.
Yeah.
Which I'm looking through some of these sources, and it's like they can want to move in themselves, do a major renovation, or even demolish the building.
Exactly. And those reasons can't just be excuses either.
Right.
California law requires them to be legitimate and provable.
Okay.
So, for example, if a landlord claims they're evicting you for an owner move-in, they can't just turn around and rent that unit to someone else for a higher price.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's a system in place to sort of prevent landlords from abusing these no-fault provisions?
Exactly.
But how does a tenant know
That's a good question.
if the reason they're being given is actually legit?
That is where the notice comes in.
Okay.
And this is really important for tenants to pay attention to. The landlord is required to provide you with a written notice that very clearly states the reason for the eviction and outlines your rights as a tenant.
I'm looking at one of the sources here, and it's saying, it's really important to read that notice super carefully.
Yeah.
It has to have specific information, like the exact legal grounds for the eviction, the time frame.
Yep.
You have to move out.
Right.
And even details about potential relocation assistance.
All of that has to be in that notice.
Don't just glance at it and toss it aside.
Yeah.
This is
That notice is a legal document.
Okay.
It's their first line of defense.
So let's say you get this notice.
Okay.
And the reason is owner move in. What are some red flags that might kind of tip you off that the landlord's not being totally on the up and up? Okay,
well, one thing to think about is the landlord's history with the property.
Okay.
Have they used the owner move-in reason before?
Right.
Do they own multiple units and frequently cycle through tenants using this justification?
So do a little detective work.
Yeah.
A little digging. Check public records.
Uh-huh.
Maybe even talk to other tenants in the building.
Exactly.
See if there's a pattern of behavior.
Right. And pay attention to the timing.
Okay.
Is the eviction notice coming right after you've requested repairs or raised concerns about habitability issues?
Oh, interesting.
That could be a sign of a retaliatory eviction,
right,
which is illegal in California.
This is where it starts to feel kind of overwhelming.
Yeah.
To be honest.
I know it.
There's so much to think about. So many
it's a load.
Potential pitfalls. That's you need a law degree just to understand your own rights.
You're right. It can be incredibly daunting. And that's precisely why it's so important to have access to legal guidance.
Yeah.
Do not hesitate to reach out to a tenants' rights organization or an attorney who specializes in eviction defense.
Okay.
They can help you make sense of the notice, assess the validity of the landlord's claims, and advise you on the best course of action.
So it's like having a guide.
Exactly.
In this legal wilderness.
Yeah.
But even with legal help, is there anything tenants can do proactively?
Yes.
To protect themselves?
It's absolutely.
Are there any preemptive measures?
Documentation is key.
Okay.
Keep detailed records of everything.
Okay.
Rent payments. Communication with your landlord, maintenance requests, and any issues that arise during your tenancy. That way, if you ever face a no-fault eviction, you have a really strong paper trail to support your case.
Okay, so it's like
you're building a legal fortress around yourself.
Right.
Brick by brick.
And even if the landlord's reason seems legit on the surface, there's still legal requirements they have to stick to. And those can vary depending on your location.
Absolutely.
We haven't even talked about city-specific ordinances and how those can
That's another layer.
Add another layer to this.
To this whole thing.
right? Like, for example, in Los Angeles, there are specific rules about relocation assistance.
Right.
Depending on the reason for the eviction and the length of your tenancy.
That's a perfect example.
Okay.
So while understanding these general principles of no-fault evictions is important, it's crucial to also dive into the specifics of your local jurisdiction.
So it really is like knowledge is power.
Exactly.
The more we understand about the law and our rights as tenants, the better we can navigate this.
For sure.
This tricky terrain.
You've got it.
And it's also like, you don't have to face this alone.
You don't.
There are resources available, people who can advocate for you.
Yes.
And make sure your rights are protected.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've covered like what no-fault evictions are, the crucial role of that notice, importance of documentation, and legal guidance.
Right.
But what happens next?
Okay.
What if the landlord is like determined to move forward? With this eviction, what are our options for fighting back?
That is a great question, and it's exactly where we'll pick up after a quick break.
We'll be right back. All right, so we've laid the groundwork, but now let's get into the nitty-gritty.
Okay.
Let's say you've gotten this no-fault eviction notice, and you're not ready to pack your bags just yet.
Right.
What are some concrete steps you can take to fight back?
Well, the fourth thing you need to do is carefully analyze that notice.
Okay.
Remember, it's a legal document. Every detail matters.
Okay.
Does the reason for the eviction cited by the landlord actually align with the legal grounds for no-fault evictions in California? Is the information complete and accurate?
So it's not enough for them to just say owner move in or substantial remodel. They have to give specifics.
Exactly.
And be able to back up their claims.
They do, for instance, if they're claiming an owner move in, the notice should state who specifically will be moving in, their relationship to the owner, and their intention to occupy the unit for at least 12 months as required by law.
Right, because we talked earlier about how that 12-month rule is meant to prevent landlords from using owner move-ins as a way to just get a new tenant at a higher rent.
Exactly. And when it comes to substantial remodels, the notice should outline the scope of the work, provide copies of permits, and even inform you about your right to reoccupy the unit after the renovations are complete.
That reoccupy is huge.
It is.
That means you might not be permanently displaced.
Right.
Even if you have to move out temporarily during the remodel.
Precisely. And it's one of the areas where those new changes to the law coming into effect in April 2024 really strengthen tenant protections.
Speaking of those changes, I know we touched on them briefly, but can you remind us again what those key changes are?
Sure.
And how they might impact someone facing a no-fault eviction right now?
Okay, so SB 567, the bill that enacts these changes, really tightens the screws on landlords.
Who are trying to abuse this system for owner move-ins. Not only does it require that 12-month occupancy we discussed, but it also mandates that the owner or the relative move in within 90 days of the previous tenant vacating.
So no more dragging their feet or leaving the unit vacant while they look for a higher-paying tenant.
Exactly. And if they don't comply with those rules, there are some pretty hefty penalties involved.
Oh, wow.
SB 567 also strengthens the requirements for substantial remodel evictions, demanding more detailed information from the landlord and a clearer explanation of the tenant's right to reoccupy.
Okay, so it sounds like this new law is a real game changer.
It is.
For tenants facing no-fault evictions.
It is.
But let's get back to that initial notice.
Okay.
Let's say you scrutinized it. And you have reason to believe that the landlord's reason for eviction is either invalid or just plain fishy. What's the next step?
This is where documentation becomes your best friend.
If you suspect the eviction is improper or retaliatory, maybe it's coming right after you requested repairs or complained about a safety issue, start gathering evidence.
What kind of evidence are we talking about?
Anything that supports your claim, copies of rent receipts, emails or letters you've exchanged with your landlord, photographs or videos documenting habitability issues, even notes from conversations with neighbors who might have witnessed relevant events. Remember, you're building a case to demonstrate that the eviction is not justified.
So it's like putting together a puzzle. Piece by piece to show a bigger picture. That contradicts the landlord's claims.
You got it. And while you're gathering evidence, it's crucial to reach out for legal help. A qualified tenants' rights attorney can review your situation, assess the strength of your case, and guide you on the best legal strategy.
That makes sense, but let's be real. Lawyers can be expensive.
Yeah.
What if someone can't afford legal representation?
There are still options. Many cities and counties have legal aid organizations that provide free or low-cost legal services to tenants facing eviction.
Okay, so even if you're on a tight budget,
Yeah.
you don't have to navigate this alone.
You don't. And even if you don't end up going to court, having an attorney on your side can be invaluable during negotiations with your landlord.
Right.
They can help you buy more time to find a new place and potentially secure relocation assistance and make sure your rights are protected throughout the process.
That peace of mind alone is probably worth its weight in gold during such a stressful time.
It is.
But what if the landlord refuses to budge
Okay.
and you end up having to fight the eviction in court? What does that process actually look like?
Well, in California, evictions are handled through what's called an unlawful detainer lawsuit.
Okay.
This is a fast-tracked legal process.
Okay.
Which means things move quickly and you need to be prepared.
Fast track sounds a little intimidating.
It can be. You'll typically have just 5 days to respond to the lawsuit after being served with the summons and complaint.
5 days?
Yeah.
That's barely enough time to catch your breath.
It's a tight time frame.
Let alone figure out your next move.
It is. Which is why seeking legal help early on is so important.
Yeah.
An attorney can help you understand the specific allegations in the lawsuit.
Okay.
Draft an appropriate response. And prepare your defense.
Okay, so let's say you've filed your response.
Okay.
And you're heading to court.
Right.
What are some of the arguments you might use to challenge a no-fault eviction?
Well, there are several potential strategies.
Okay.
Depending on the specifics of your case.
Yeah.
If the reason given for the eviction is an owner move-in, you could challenge the landlord's claim by presenting evidence that suggests they don't actually intend to occupy the unit themselves.
Like maybe they've listed the unit for rent on another platform?
That's right.
Or they have a history of using owner move-ins as a pretext for raising rents?
Exactly. You could also argue that the landlord hasn't met the legal requirements for an owner move-in.
Okay.
Such as providing proper notice or demonstrating that the person moving in meets the necessary criteria.
And what about substantial remodels?
Okay.
What are some possible defenses in those cases?
You could argue that the renovations don't actually meet the legal definition of a substantial remodel.
Right.
Which requires them to be so extensive that they necessitate the tenant vacating the unit.
Right.
You could also challenge whether the landlord has obtained the necessary permits or whether they've adequately informed you of your right to reoccupy.
So it's all about poking holes in the landlord's case.
It is.
And highlighting any inconsistencies or violations of the law.
That's a great way to put it. And don't forget, you can also raise issues related to habitability or discrimination if they're relevant to your situation.
This all sounds incredibly complex.
It can be.
But it's also empowering to know that there are ways to fight back.
Absolutely.
And that tenants do have legal options.
They do. And remember, even if you ultimately have to move out, a successful legal challenge can buy you valuable time.
Okay.
Potentially secure you relocation assistance and help you avoid an eviction record that could negatively impact your future housing prospects.
So even if you don't win outright, a strong defense can still lead to a more favorable outcome.
Exactly. And speaking of favorable outcomes, let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the resources and support systems available to tenants facing no-fault evictions. Because even with all the legal strategies we've discussed, sometimes just knowing where to turn for help can make all the difference.
That's a great point. We've talked a lot about the legal aspects.
Yeah.
But this whole process can be incredibly emotionally draining as well.
It can.
Knowing that you're not alone and that there are people who understand what you're going through can be incredibly comforting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's dive into those resources and support systems and see how they can help empower tenants facing no-fault evictions.
It's pretty amazing, going through all this information about no-fault evictions.
Yeah.
There's so much power in just knowing your rights.
Right.
And the resources that are available.
Absolutely.
It can really change things from feeling hopeless to feeling like you can actually take control of the situation.
It's true. It's amazing how often people just give up because they feel overwhelmed and alone.
Yeah.
But the truth is there's a whole network of support out there for tenants facing eviction.
Right.
You just need to know where to look.
So let's talk about that network.
Okay.
What are some of the key resources that tenants should be aware of?
Well, we've already mentioned legal aid organizations, which can provide invaluable legal advice and representation, often free of charge. But beyond that, There are also tenants' rights groups and advocacy organizations
Right.
that offer a wide range of services.
Like what kind of services?
They can provide information about local laws and tenant protections,
Okay.
help you understand your rights and responsibilities, connect you with other tenants facing similar situations.
Yeah.
And even offer workshops and training sessions on how to navigate the eviction process.
So it's like having a whole team in your corner.
Exactly. Waiting for you.
And don't underestimate the power of community support.
Right.
Talking to other tenants who've been through this can be incredibly validating and empowering.
Yeah.
It can help you realize that you're not alone, that there are solutions, and that you can get through this.
I imagine those shared experiences can also offer like practical tips and strategies for dealing with specific landlords or navigating the legal system.
For sure.
It's like a collective wisdom that could be so valuable.
Absolutely. And you'd be surprised how many people are willing to help.
Yeah.
There's a real sense of solidarity among tenants.
Yeah.
Especially in areas where no-fault evictions are really prevalent.
It's like a shared understanding that this isn't just about individual cases. It's about like a systemic issue.
That affects entire communities.
Precisely. And that collective awareness is what fuels the fight for stronger tenant protections and more equitable housing policies.
Okay, so we've talked about legal aid, tenants' rights groups, and the power of community support. Are there any other resources that we haven't touched on yet?
Well, depending on your location and circumstances, there might be government agencies or nonprofit organizations that offer financial assistance to tenants facing eviction.
Okay.
This could include help with rent payments, moving expenses, or even temporary housing.
So even if the eviction seems unavoidable, there might be resources available to help cushion the blow.
Right.
And make the transition a little bit easier.
Exactly. And don't forget about the online resources available.
Right.
There are websites, forums, and social media groups dedicated to tenants' rights where you can find information, connect with others, and get advice.
That's a good point in this digital age.
Yeah.
We have access to so much information.
We do.
And support at our fingertips.
We do.
We just need to know where to look.
It's true. And remember, seeking help early on is crucial.
Right.
The sooner you reach out to these resources, the more options you'll have, and the better equipped you'll be to navigate the situation effectively.
So if there's one key takeaway from all this, it's don't wait until you're at your wit's end. Reach out for help.
Yes.
Gather information and connect with those support systems as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Knowledge is power. And in this case, it can be the difference between feeling powerless and feeling empowered to fight for your rights.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Even in the face of a no-fault eviction, remember that you have options, you have rights, and you are not alone.
Yeah.
There are resources available, people who care, and a community ready to support you.
Right.
Don't give up.
That's such an important message of hope and resilience. And on that note, we wrap up our deep dive into no-fault evictions in California. We hope this information has empowered you to take action, connect with resources, and face this challenge head on. Remember, knowledge is your shield and community is your strength.
Call now 714-442-9741. Thank you.